Flying commercial versus flying private. Many people ask me that more than potentially others because I have a private pilot's license and people know that I have access to different planes and things like that. So the question comes up rather often. And one of the arguments with all of that is that it doesn't make sense to take a single engine plane or a small jet to make transatlantic flights. That's just going to take forever to get from A to B. I mean, not that I don't want to ever do that. It's, I think, one of these pilots' dreams to actually, at one point in time, do a transatlantic flight in a small plane, but not on a daily basis, not for business. So when it comes down to commercial versus private, it is always a cost versus usage consideration. To be realistic, if I'm flying alone, even if I'm flying from, let's say, San Francisco to Dubai, which is one of my next flights, is the difference in comfort between flying something like Emirates first versus a private jet is minor, because I can actually get chauffeur service from the airline. I can actually show up relatively short before the plane leaves and a lot of other things. So the time difference is not that much different. And I would end up in both situations on the same airport. So there is no value in that. And it would just actually be 10 to more times the price for the exactly same flight and not much more of a service because I'm going to sleep most of the flight anyway. When it comes down to more local flights, especially in the US, where you have a lot of small airports which are fully equipped for instrument-rated approaches and stuff like that, this whole story becomes completely different because you have the same struggle as in Europe. I mean, I have TSA pre, so I can basically squeeze through security and a lot of other things faster, but you still need to be there early. There are, during the day, a lot of flight delays. If you have to take connection flights, it becomes a different story. So when you take all of that into consideration, all of a sudden private aviation becomes far more attractive in the US, again, because it's also cheaper from that specific scenario. For me, it always depends on, you also need to look into what is your hourly value for the company. So let's take a very simplistic example. Let's say two leadership people or two architects are actually traveling for the company. They are valued for the company, let's say with $3,000, $5,000 a day, then you have a specific scenario where you can look into is like, okay, so how much more can they accomplish if I fly them private versus commercial? And then in many, many cases, if it's not only one, if it's 2 or 3 people, and they can achieve, for example, 2, 3, 4 customer meetings in one day versus only 1 or 2, then this becomes a completely different equation because they have more and more billable day and stuff like that. So what's important when you look at these kinds of discussions and decisions all the time is, what is your value for the company? What is the cost on the other side? How much more can you achieve by going private versus commercial? And then this is a different equation. Also, what everybody who has a private pilot's license is actually fooling themselves with is the amount of preparation and things you have to do after the flight. Whereas if I'm flying private, if I'm chartering a plane with a pilot here in the US, the storyline is relatively simple. I can show up 5 minutes before our departure at the terminal, and then I will be brought on the plane. We directly get off, and the same happens on the other side. So I really don't lose time. As a pilot, there is certain sets of preparation. Modern tools make that easier. You could actually even have someone else do that for you. There are certain scenarios where someone actually at least does the refueling and other things for you, so you can save the time on some scenarios. But in reality, if you're really flying yourself, you're losing some time again. On the other side, you get the adventure of flying yourself, which personally I like a lot. So it heavily depends on. So there is no simple answer for that. But in many, many cases, private aviation, especially if you have a leadership role, absolutely makes sense because you save something which you can't regenerate. No matter how much money you have, you save time, and that is more precious than most people think. And that actually helps you achieve more. And that's in the end why so many people in that scenario do that. By the way, the amount of private aviation also in Europe is massively increasing. However, there is a huge difference. In Europe, many people try to avoid talking about that because they get other people who are jealous about them. They get other people who can kind of actually say, it's like, oh, this is why you are so expensive and la-di-la-di-la-di. So in reality, we see a similar increase as in the United States for private aviation in Europe. However, it is kept more silent. We have less airports and less other scenarios. But trust me, I have a lot of friends by now who are in the pilots business. And let's face it, many of them tell me it's a rather increasing market, not a shrinking market. So what's your opinion? Have you ever flown private? Do you think about flying private? What's your tipping point for that?